Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to Floating in Dreams, welcome to my warm toned eyeshadow palette ranking. I thought we could do this. I found I have 50 of these, so we better get started. Welcome if you're new here, welcome if you're a returning visitor. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I love chatting about eyeshadow palettes, so that's something that you'll see me doing regularly on this channel. I also love reviewing Essence and Catrice products, and I also really like getting the use out of my products, which is why I'm so surprised that I have 50 warm tone palettes to rank for you today. Because I always keep saying how much I love cool tones and rosy tone, mauve tone palettes. Of course, there were a lot of palettes in those videos too, but I did lump all of the warm tones together, so also the more colorful things like yellows, reds, and oranges, because I feel I don't have that many. Plus I have included all of my berry tone palettes in this video, so we've got a lot to chat about. Yeah, I was a bit surprised that for someone who says they don't like warm tones, I have a lot of warm tone palettes, so let's get to this ranking. So as per usual, I'm going to be organizing this for you in chapters. I'm going to start off with the honorable mentions, which are palettes I haven't used yet. I haven't put these on my face yet, so I can't make them part of the ranking because I won't know. And then we still have 48 left to rank. So I'm going to make sure there are steps in this process so that if you just want to watch the top 5 or just the top 10, that you can. So what are my honorable mentions? Let's start there. We are going to be talking briefly about these two things. These are things I bought in the past couple of months. This is the Game Beauty Victory palette, which I bought to round out the set because then I got free shipping, but also because it has the teals. And you'll see when we do the ranking that I'm not a huge fan if the warm tone palette is simply warm tones. I like it if it has something else going on. So that's why I thought this could be nice. And the other thing I have here is the Venus in Fleurs Luxe Quad in Voyeuristic Vixen from Pat McGrath. And this came out when she launched her blushes. And this, because it was warm toned, didn't interest me immediately. But then I spotted this in store and I gave it a swatch. And I felt that even though it is warm toned, because of the undertones in this, it is a bit more burgundy, reddish, berry tone leaning almost, that I think I can get away with it. And these two shades, for once, don't play up gold on my complexion. It's got a very interesting duochrome, textured kind of shade, and a good matte that rounds out the palette. So I thought this was one of her better launches of 2021. So I picked it up in the Black Friday sale. I just haven't gotten around to trying it yet, but that's something I look forward to trying at some point soon. So I'm going to be grouping these in stacks of 5 so I can keep track of where we're roughly at in the ranking. I'm going to lose count, I know I will, but this is the section that goes from number 44 to 48. So all the way at the bottom of this ranking is this. This is the Balm's Nude Beach eyeshadow palette, and it's really, really good. It's just one that I haven't used. I bought this and then just did looks with it for my review and never reviewed it and never did anything else with it. I think that by the time this was launched, these palettes from the Balm just weren't getting a lot of hype anymore. And it is a good warm tone palette for my complexion. I really like it because you do get some rosy shades in here, which suit my complexion really well. If I need to go warm toned, make them rosy, make them berries. That's what I like. Most of the warm-toned, rosy-toned palettes, however, aren't even in this video, because those were in my rose and mauve-toned video that I did already. But yeah, this, I don't know, I just never really got the use out of it, and this is definitely on the chopping block, because I don't really see myself reaching for this. Then we have the next one, which is going to be the Catrice Pro Slim Peach Origin palette. So a lot of the Pro Slim palettes I actually ended up liking quite a bit. However, this one, it wasn't really good quality. So that's why this gets to go all the way at the bottom of this ranking, because quality-wise, I felt this was very much lacking. You do get some nice shades, but do you just see how bland this top row is? It's essentially 7 times the same shade. So it doesn't really have that much going for it. And then the powderiness of this of the texture of these shadows I didn't love either. So this just wasn't a good one. Catrice did a couple of these, they launched them in sets, and this came together with the Lavender Breeze, and both those palettes, I thought the quality was a little bit off. So that also goes for this one. The next one in this ranking isn't here because of the ranking, but because it is a bit, it's bland to me. And that's the Essence Bronze This Way from their little mini collection. Is this a nice palette? Yeah, I think that if you are looking for warm tones at a very affordable price point, this is a really, really good one. It's just that on me, this just didn't look like anything special. And I have other warm tone palettes that I far more appreciate than I do this one. So I think that this is good if you're a beginner and you don't want to buy something, you know, if you want to buy something that doesn't break the bank, then this is lovely. But you'll see, I have a lot of other warm tones, also affordable ones, that I just like better. And then I think the next one is a bit controversial because this is a palette that was everyone's favorite for like a solid year. I think a couple of years ago, the Color Rain Queen of Hearts palette was really making the rounds. But I have just found that this palette is too similar to other things I already own. Again, a palette I purchased because of the hype, that I just didn't feel it. The purples in here are very hardly pressed and just aren't that great. And the shade I ended up loving the most and why I wanted it was Royal Highness, which is like a cool toned rose gold. So my favorite shade in the palette isn't even a warm tone. So I just felt it was a bit lacking, and you'll see that I have another palette that I feel does very similar things for me that is much higher up in this ranking. Finally, in this bottom part, so this would be number 44 in this ranking, is Lorac Pro 1. I love my Lorac palettes. The Lorac Pro 3 is one of my all-time favorite palettes. You guys know that about me. But this, I don't know. I've never really gotten the hang of this palette. The only shade in here that I've ever really appreciated was Garnet, which is this coppery shade. But again, I feel I have coppers in other palettes that I have that I far more appreciate. I like the taupe shade in here. That's pretty. This mauve shade is really nice too. It's got a couple of good basics, but what I've always found with this one, and with a lot of warm tone palettes and a lot of neutral palettes that a lot of people raved about, is that I can pretty much forget about this part of the palette because it's too dark. These 4 shades don't look distinct on my very fair skin. They all look black. The next section is going to be numbers 39 through 43. So 43 is going to be this. I don't think you can still buy this. This has been discontinued from Kiko. This is their Color Fever Quad in 101. It's a really pretty cranberry shade. Really, really pretty. It's not something I reach for a lot. I did use this in a full face of Kiko at some point and was like, oh yes, these are baked shadows. They are really lovely quality. It's just not really me at the moment, which is why I just never think of reaching for this. So that's why this is another thing that's definitely on the chopping block. And one that I would declutter if I could, but I don't want to break up its little family. We're talking about the Nabla Cutie palette in Metropolitan. This entire Cutie line I love, as you will see. I love the nude. I love the midnight. I love so many of these, but this, it doesn't vibe. And the reason why it doesn't really go is because it just doesn't really have shades that I feel go together. This color story just feels a bit haphazard. Like, these two and this one, I understand. This shade is stunning. This I want to keep it around for. Like, that's the only thing that gets to stay. But this really intense yellow tone gold, you guys know, I don't love yellow tone golds. I just don't. This coral shade, I'm not sure what it's supposed to do, but peachy neon coral, it looked terrible on my complexion. And then that white has a blue shift. Why? How does that go with anything else? I don't understand this one. So I promised we would also be chatting about some things that would be more colorful but warm toned. And this is one of the reddish tone palettes that I wanted to put in here. This is the Main Squeeze from ColourPop. And this is a red tone palette that I do really appreciate. I felt that when I used it, it looked a lot better on my complexion than I thought it was going to. But this is no longer the original color story. I swapped out a couple of the shades here for other things. And when I do another declutter, I think I'm going to actually put this in completely different packaging. I own the Cherry Crush, which I didn't put in this ranking because in my brain it's more pink. And so it's not very warm, if that makes sense. It's like pinky, purpley tones to me. So I didn't feel it deserved a place in this ranking today. But I think I want to take one of the shimmers from that palette and put it with these shades, because I do appreciate some of the shades in here. I just don't really like the plastic packaging that ColourPop does. And then we're at number 40, and this packaging is also a little bit broken here. So again, something I'll do with the shades in here once I declutter my makeup collection next month is to take these shades out and put it in a different palette, because this just doesn't close anymore. And again, the Aha Honey from ColourPop is a great yellow tone palette. I appreciate it, but it had a pressed glitter, and this was the deepest shade it came with originally. So this is again a deep potted shade from somewhere else. This came from The Mandalorian, The Child, because I felt it was just a little bit bland. So is this still a yellow tone palette? Perhaps it's not, but I've put a couple of shades in that I really thought rounded out the palette a bit more. But again, it wasn't perfect by itself, which is why I get to go into the bottom part of this ranking. But as you will see, I don't have that many true yellow tone palettes, so that's why this does get to go in this part of the ranking. I didn't love it because of the way it was set up, and I have other things I do prefer, but it's still a good one, and it's quite unique to my collection. Finally, in this part of the ranking, so number 39 would be the Juvia's Place The Berries palette. And this, I really like. This shade in particular, I love it for, and this as well. Both of the shimmers in here are quite duochrome, which I love. But the mattes are far too dark for my complexion. Like these two, this one and this one, it looks like I was punched in the face. And this has a bit of sparkle running through it. I like that, but there's nothing really here that I can use as a blend shade or that really works on me as a transition, which is why this one sadly has to go in this part of the ranking. The next section goes from numbers 34 through 38. So we're gonna start with number 38, which would be the Sleek Sunset palette. Who remembers Sleek? Oh my, I still have a couple of them in my collection, but I think it's time for this to go. I don't own that many warm tone palettes with a pop of blue. Believe it or not, I really don't, even though that was like the thing. Like every palette was a warm tone palette with a pop of blue for a minute there. But Sleek was, oh, why is this little paper stuck? So Sleek was the OG when it came to this, because the Sunset palette was one of the first palettes they launched way back in the day. And it's warm tones with a pop of blue, which is why I always kept it around, because it also has a really good orange. It's the best orange in my entire collection, and these shades, even though they're quite old, like, do you just see? It just works really well. So for me, the Sleek Sunset palette has always had a place in my heart. Look at that. Next up, we have the Chanel Quad. This is their Les Quatre Ombres, Candeur et Expérience, number 268. I believe they still do it. When I got it, it was limited edition. It was part of the fall collection. And this is warm tone mattes. Not necessarily something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. Is it pretty? Oh yeah. Are these buttery smooth blendable mattes? Oh yeah. Does this get a lot of use? Hell to the no. But it's Chanel, and that's why it's kind of stuck around in my collection. Like, I bought this when warm tones were all the rage, and I thought I had to make them work on myself. That's sort of the time period this stems from. It's good, it's nice. Like, if I had to keep a warm tone palette around, this would definitely get to stay no matter what, because it is lovely quality, but it's just not something I reach for. Something I would very much reach for, but again, it's not a palette I tend to use by itself. I love pairing this Huda Beauty Nude Rich palette with the Nude Light that I also own from the same collection. I felt that the Nude Light, even though it's a really good neutral palette for me, was just a little lackluster, and I didn't feel it gave me everything I would want. I want my shadows to have a bit more dimension. So I bought the Nude Rich to complement that and to, for instance, take some of these like more plummy berry shades to add something a little bit more interesting to the Nude Light. I have found that this works really well by itself on me as well, even though this is aimed at people with deeper skin tones than mine. I felt it worked really well. It was very pretty on. It's got some interesting shimmers. This is a good enough transition shade for me as well. I get something to lighten up the inner corner. Like it's a fully rounded palette even for someone as fair as me. But I do like this more so as a complementary palette rather than a standalone. So this is definitely something I will pull in if I want to up the ante of my Nude Light, and that's why this gets to go into the number 36 spot. Then we have in the number 35 spot another high-end quad. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Dolce Vita quad. Now this I like. It was renamed though. I think it's called the Bella Vita, I think. I'm not sure. Or Belle V, something like that. It's something Belle something. This is really pretty. It's like the Chanel. It stems from the period in time that almost everything that was released was warm toned, and I felt I needed to make warm tones work. I mean, it's pretty, and you can definitely tell that I've used it. Like there's a bit of a dent in that champagne shade, but this is just not something I use on the daily. I think actually my mom might like this because she's got green eyes, and that's one of the things I did always like about this palette, is that it's still soft enough that it sort of dissipates into something that is still wearable on my pale complexion. It's not overly warm, and that reddish tone that it has does bring out some of the green that I have in my eyes, because I have brown eyes, but with the right makeup they can look like they have a hint of green, and this is a palette that definitely brings that out. Finally then, in this part of the ranking is the Huda Beauty Khaki Haze palette. So these haze palettes weren't as colorful as a lot of people wanted to. I think a lot of people wanted this to be like a full-on khaki palette, which it's called the Khaki Haze. But to me this is a warm tone palette with a pop of green. That's how I see it, and I appreciate it for that. I prefer one of the other haze palettes, so that's going to come up in another part of the ranking. But you get some lovely warm tones here. Then these two like greeny tones, this brown goes with it really well. Again, I have a transition here that works. And then you just have some interesting shimmers to round out the palette. So for me, in my brain, the way I view this is as a warm tone neutral palette with a pop of khaki green. So the next part of the ranking is numbers 27 through 33, and number 33 is the Too Faced Original Chocolate Bar, because this was my least favorite chocolate bar of all time. Like, I kept this around to complete the collection. That's why I bought it. I never loved it. It was far too dark for my complexion. Everything I did with this looked the same. Against my skin tone, this didn't work at all. I have other Too Faced palettes that I like a lot better, but they are not even in this ranking today because I just didn't love their warm tones all that much. I mean, there's a couple of shades here that I like this section here I like. So Salted Caramel was one of my favorite transitions. I like those shades, but like this was always far too dark. It didn't look plummy on me at all. These two shades just didn't really work on me. So for me, it didn't give me what everybody was so raving about when this was launched. And I just never got the hype with this one. Next up is another Nabla Cutie palette, and this is their Wild Berry. And this, until I had tried the Metropolitan, was my least favorite Nabla Cutie palette, because I don't know why, but this, I just wasn't feeling the quality. I know that for a lot of people, this is actually their favorite cutie palette, or one of their favorites, but for me it definitely even goes at the bottom of my favorite cutie palettes. It just does. It does have Alchemy 2.0, which is a really lovely shimmer, but I just don't really feel it goes with everything else. So a similar gripe here as with the Metropolitan. This color story just doesn't come together for me at all. Another Huda Beauty palette here. This is her Neon Obsessions in the orange shade. I told you I would also be ranking my orange palettes in today's video, and I ended up going with this one from the Neon collection. I very much was like undecided which one to get. The pink one I felt was a little like too monochromatic, like one note, and the neon green just wasn't green, and it really I didn't like that all that much. Whereas this one, I felt, was a combination of those three. So it's got the oranges, but you also get pinks in here, and you get this neon yellow green. So I thought this worked a lot better. And this, I like. I really, really enjoy this. I only like it like 1 week over the summertime. It gives me popsicle vibes. That's what this reminds me of. So it's very sort of nostalgic in that sense. So that's what I love this one for, but it's definitely not something I reach for a lot. Then next up is another Too Faced palette. I knew I wanted to rank these somewhere towards the bottom. So the Too Faced Sweet Peach. This, I mean, just no. For me, save for like these two brown shades, this entire section just didn't work on me. Like, this green is just a bit lackluster. I quite like Bellini, but I don't love it anymore as much. These shades all looked black on me. It just didn't work at all. Some of the shimmers in here are lovely, and I did really appreciate these very light mattes here, but also the scent of this, for me, I didn't start appreciate this palette until I was like 2 years old, because that's when the scent had died down enough for me to be able to open it and hold it next to my face. So for me, I just never loved this again as much as all the hype would warrant. No, this is just not one that I reach for. I don't think about this. I don't even really love peachy tones all that much on me. And do you want to hear me harp on about another cult favorite palette? Urban Decay Naked. I kind of put it in the bottom of this ranking because it is discontinued, but also because this has never been my favorite Naked palette. How many people have you seen this hold up in videos that have had this palette for years and have major pan on every single shade? Not me. This is my old one. I never bought a new one. This is the one, granted, when I first got into makeup, when this was all the rage, I used very, very light hand with my makeup, so I wasn't about the hip pan because this was expensive, and I was like very much at that stage in my life where I was like, this is an expensive product. I want to make it last, and I want to make it like, have it stand the test of time. This still works. It performs well. It does. But on me, here again, like with the Too Faced, most of the palette just doesn't work. It just doesn't. So the shades I went for are these four. Like, those are the 4 shades in this palette I reached for, and then maybe Sidecar. That's it. And then I think one of my favorite Huda Beauty Obsessions palettes that are warm toned that I have, I definitely prefer her more cool tone ones, far better than this, but from the browns collection she did, I picked up the chocolate brown, which, like the Nude Rich, you might look at this and go like, why would you be interested in this? To me, it has the same appeal as the Nude Rich. It's got the dark shades that I want to darken things up, and while it looks orange, but that's only because of this shade. If you cover this up, do you just see how neutral this is? It is quite neutral. It does have some like peachy things going on here, but this is almost like rosy toned, like what's going on here. So especially like if you hold it like this, I'm not sure if you can see, but that's a great palette for my complexion, and then you just have something to deepen things up with. And then finally, number 27 in this part of the ranking is another Too Faced tin palette. It's the Gingerbread Spice. Because this, I don't even like because of the warm tones it has. My favorite shade in this palette is this, which is called Spice Rum. Yes, Spice Rum, which is like a taupey cool tone with silver sparkle. That's my favorite shade in this entire palette. And I like these 2 berry shades, but the rest of this, again, I haven't used this for a while. This may just have to go at some point because I don't reach for this. I don't think about this. This doesn't have my name written all over it. I like some of my Too Faced palettes till this day, but it's not this one. So the next section is numbers 22 through 26. And number 26 is the replacement of that OG Naked palette, the Naked Reloaded. I far more like this than I did the original Naked. However, I don't know why this is in the Naked line. It has very different packaging. It's called the Naked Reloaded, but I felt it doesn't stand up against the original Naked at all. A lot of people compared this to an ABH palette, which was a sultry, but to me this is far more warm toned than the sultry is, and even the sultry isn't as cool toned as a lot of people make it out to seem. I liked this, but I felt it was a little samey. So these corally shades all pretty much pull the same. So I really only liked these 4 shades. Again, not a palette I use a lot. Again, not a palette I really think about, but because it's a Naked palette and I like to keep all of my Naked palettes together, this does get to stay. And yeah, will I be reaching for this a lot? I mean, it's got a couple of good shades. But these are just, by this time, when this was released, I was also on the fence. Like, should I buy this just because it's a Naked palette? Because I remember looking at this and going like, I know I will not get the use out of this. Yet I still have it. Palettes that I far more appreciate for their warm tones by Zoeva. These were sadly discontinued, but their original like chocolate bar kind of palettes I do really appreciate. So that's why they're sort of like in the middle part of this ranking, because the Spice of Life, I mean, this is fun. I mean, it's warm tones. You get some reds in here, some bronzes. It has, similarly to the Queen of Hearts, a really stunning cool tone that really brings something differently to the table for me. I get the blend shades and transition shades that I need. There is some depth to deepen things up with, and then you get this like, it's like a greenish gold. It's really stunning. It just has something a little bit more interesting, yet it's still warm toned. So yeah, Spice of Life I think is a great name for this, but it was released a little bit later than their other chocolate bars, so I don't think this got the hype it really deserved, but yeah, I do really appreciate these. The one that got all the hype was the Zoeva Cocoa Blend eyeshadow palette. And the Cocoa Blend definitely had a moment on YouTube. So many people were raving about this. And I remember this, again, buying it at a time that everything was warm toned, and I wanted to try this because so many people were raving about it. I still want to keep this around in my collection, mainly because of the cranberry shade it has. Like, this shade is so good. It's got a couple of really good like staples here in the bottom as well. But for me, this was never a well-rounded palette. I like it, I appreciate it, I still like looking at this and going like, yes, if I have to go warm tones, this is something I could still reach for till this day, which is why I still have it, but it was discontinued, which is why I couldn't rank it any higher. This palette has been knocked down a couple of notches in this ranking. If I had to do this ranking about a year ago, this would have ranked higher, but a new palette was released that I feel is very similar to this, that is a little bit more perfect for my makeup tastes. You'll see that in a minute, but what I'm talking about is the Kathleen Lights and ColourPop Dream Street palette. This, I think, is one of the most successful color stories that ColourPop has ever done. Is it my favorite? No, because it is warm tones, but the teals in here still have my heart. I'm actually thinking of combining these teals and also this kaleidoscope shimmer with the teals in the High Tide. Like, take the High Tide shades and put it in here. That's the plan. And then just get rid of the warm tones, because I now, like I said, I have something to replace this. And then finally, number 22 in this part of the ranking is the Zoeva Caramel Melange. Of these chocolate bars, of the very warm, spicy ones that they did, this was my favorite. I did nick it. It's got some casualties here, but especially these shimmers over here, this shade especially. It's called Liquid Center. Shall I swatch it for you? Because you won't believe me when I do. Like, this is stunning all over the lid. It's just not the kind of shade I reach for a lot. But if I want to go warm toned, like, hello. Do you just see that? It's so pretty. So the next section of the video is going to be numbers 11 through 21, because I had just one extra that I wanted to put in this part of the ranking. But yeah, the number 21 palette in this ranking today is the Naked Heat from Urban Decay. And this was when a lot of people started raving about Urban Decay doing good quality again, which was nice. I very much appreciate it because I never fell out of love with the Urban Decay Naked formula. But this I appreciate because it has those like reddish tones in there. So I don't really like this section of the palette. I never really was interested in, but I do like some of the red tones that it has here. However, if you're asking me if this is a neutral palette, on me, it just isn't. This pulls very similarly on me as something like the Main Squeeze, which I can get away with. It looks okay. It really isn't that terrible, but it's perhaps a little red. And that's why not something I want to reach for every single day. So while I see merit in this palette, I don't use it that often. Now I mentioned that not all of the Pro Slim palettes from Catrice were that great, but one of the better quality ones that they did is the Neon Earth. If you can still find it and you love warm tones, definitely check this one out because it had the same really good quality as the Next Gen Nudes that they did in the same line. But this has those spicy oranges and quite a lot of dimension in here as well. It goes dark enough, so I really appreciated it for that, and it has the good quality. It's just color story wise not my favorite kind of palette, but I do really appreciate this palette for what it does. Next up is Kaleido's Futurism 2 Cyber Bronze. So they did the Shishimi City in this as well, but that I feel is more like smack in the middle neutral. So I put that in my top 10 neutral tone palette. And the other palettes in this line are all quite colorful. So I didn't really feel like they could go in this part of the ranking at all, like in this ranking. But the Cyber Bronze is a warm tone palette with a silver. And it's the red and the silver in this palette that really give it something unique. You get 3 warm tone mattes, and then you get this rose gold kind of shade. And this is a palette that I really appreciate for it being something more unique that it has to offer and still being warm tones. I don't reach for this a lot, and I'm actually sort of on the fence on what to do with this because I have these kind of shades that I do like in this palette. In other places in my collection, I feel. So do I still want to keep it? Do I want to break up my Futurism family? I'm not entirely sure yet, but I do believe that these are magnetic. So maybe I can make this work, but I really like the packaging of this one. Like, it's got that metallic, oh, there, now you can see, it's got that metallic rose gold running through it. Really enjoy the packaging of these. And then we have Juvia's Place. Juvia's Place makes some of my favorite warm toned eyeshadow palettes. They just do. The Saharan palette from Juvia's, I just really like. So the Saharan palette by Juvia's Place is just one that I just enjoy. I do have to say though, I used to own the Afrique, and this was a peachy shade that I didn't love. So I took the red from the Afrique and put it in here. So I repressed that shade into this palette. It has this really nice vibrant orange shade. It's got this dirty green toned antique gold that I love. This shade also has a bit more of a green. And then we just have a bronze, a rose gold, a cranberry in here. We get some nice mattes to round things out. And then we've got the dark black matte. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. Then next up is a palette that I came into not of my free will. I didn't buy this, but I got it as a gift free with purchase, and it greatly surprised me, which is why it gets to go quite high up in the ranking. This is the Charlotte Tilbury. It's a mouthful. This is the Easy Eye palette for the Charlotte Darling look. And this is a cute little 6-span, warm toned, but again, like the Dolce Vita, not that warm tone that it makes you look sickly. This is very pretty, really wearable, and this is also split into 2 parts. So the way this is, the instructions that comes with is that this is your day eye, and then this is your date eye. But of course you can also mix and match these. So a lot of dimension, some stunning rose golds in here. It's a really good neutrally warm tone palette that I really do appreciate. Would I buy this though full price? I don't think so. So remember my telling you that the Dream Street palette from ColourPop had been knocked down a few notches? It's because of this baby. This is the Naked Wild West from Urban Decay, and this palette is my replacement of that. It has very similar colors. The teals in here are a little bit more green toned leaning rather than blue toned. So are they then true teals? I'm not entirely sure. And this has the mixture of some grayish cool tones, which I really like. So for me, this isn't as warm and spicy coral peachy leaning as the Dream Street is, but I do feel I get very similar looks with this, which is why I do appreciate it. If I want to go warm toned, like, can it be this? Like, I like this. And then we get to number 15, and from here on, I will be saying the actual number that we're at. This is the ABH Modern Renaissance. This was a cult favorite for so many people for so many years, and I never really got the hype at first. Like, I didn't really get it until I really found my mojo with this palette. So for me, I dislike most of the palette, but I love the berry tones in here. Like this sextet, these are my shades. So we have warm taupe, we have Venetian red, red ochre, buon fresco, antique bronze, love letter, and I like pulling in a bit of cypress umber ever so often. So again, this part of the palette is where it's at. This orange I've never understood. And I do rope in some of the lighter shades for blending shades, and these make for some inner corner highlights that I like. But for me, the main focus is always like this part of the palette. Number 14 is what I feel the Naked Heat should have been for it to be a warm-toned, naked, neutral palette. Tartlet Toasted by Tarte. This I have always kept around because it does have these like orangey, spicy sort of shades. So it is warm toned, but it is also quite neutral because you get quite a lot of lighter shades here. You do get some deep shades to deepen things out with. This dark brown isn't too warm, making it more neutral leaning, I feel, because really the very warm shades are right here in the middle. And even though these are warm toned as well, they pull a little bit more neutral. And then these shades as well, I could have just gone without like the sparkle in this shade for sure. But in terms of like warm toned neutral that is more orangey leaning, this is definitely one of my favorites. And you know, I love a bit of affordable eyeshadow as well, and we haven't mentioned these yet because these are so high up in the ranking because I love them. What am I talking about? In the number 13 spot, Catrice's 5 in a Box Vivid Burgundy Look. I love this little thing. Of the later two that they launched, this was my favorite of the two. On me, this burgundy shade doesn't pull very red. It pulls more rosy pink, so it's more of like a berry vibe on me, which I like. This dark brown is really nice. It has a stunning rose gold shimmer. Even this lightest shade has a little bit of that pinky reddish undertone to it. These palettes are so clever, so smart. I have put these very high up in a lot of my rankings so far because I love these little Catrice palettes and they don't break the bank. And another small palette that I greatly, greatly appreciate because once I found out that I love berry tones in terms of warm tones, I fell in love with number 12, the Blushing Berries from Dose of Colors. And this, if I want to go like all matte berry, this is what I reach for. It has a really, really good black and then just every berry shade you could possibly want. It doesn't have any shimmers though, so I tend to rope those things in. But like the rosy, like the mauve tone one that they do as well, that got ranked pretty highly in my rosy mauve tone palette video too. Like this is really good formula. I really like it. It's just that I have other berries that I like even more than I do this. And just outside of the top 10, number 11, the other 5 in a Box palette, the Warm Spice Look, or Warm Spice Look from Catrice. I mean, this again has that like orangey vibe, and of all of these 5 in a Box, together with the rose one, I think this is the best quality. Like if you're looking for good bang for your buck, this truly, truly takes the cake. I don't love warm tones all that much, but this has a special place in my heart. It's got this really nice dark, dark brown. You get this orange toned matte, this bronze with a lot of orange running through it, and even the lightest shade here has a lot of gold running through it, but it's not too yellow. I love it. Now, are you ready for the top 10? because that's where we're at. Top 10 time, number 10 would be another Huda Beauty eyeshadow palette. This is her Sand Haze Obsession, and this one took me by surprise because this is one I initially didn't want to buy because I was like, But this was the reason why I ended up buying the Haze palettes, really. It is warm toned, but do you just see that it's not orangey warm tone leaning? It's got more of that rosy sort of, yeah, desert vibe, I would say. So it definitely does have something peachy here, but everything else, like if you cover that shade up, like a bit like the chocolate browns, it just doesn't have that many traditional warm orangey tones. And you'll see in this top 10, yeah, that's not what I go for when I like a warm tone. This is soft, this is neutral, I get the blend shades I need. It's still dark enough to deepen it up. You know the spiel. I love this. This is a good warm tone palette that's still very neutral and wearable on my fair skin tone that just loves cool tones a lot more than I do warm tones. Number 9 is, I think, one of my favorite Juvia's Place palettes of all time. It keeps going in and out of stock, so I'm not sure if you can still get it, but this is the Saharan 2 from Juvia's Place. And the reason why I put this up so high is because the mattes in here, especially this cranberry matte, is one of the best mattes that Juvia's Place has ever done, but it is very shimmer heavy. It's got 6 shimmers. Yes, because I love a shimmer over a matte. And it's got a lot of duochromes because the entire top row is like duochromes. And it is a warm tone palette with a pop of blue and a pop of mint. Let me just swatch that cranberry shade for you. Like that matte here. Let me swatch that. Look, I always keep swatching this because this is lovely. This is such a good shade. I mean, that is a matte, you guys. So number 8 in this ranking is another Huda Beauty palette. I haven't really talked about a lot of her other warm tones in like the warm palette, like the larger palettes, because those I don't have, save for the Desert Dusk, and that is also one of my favorite warm tone palettes. And again, because it has a little bit more going on than just the warm tones. Yes, it has the warm, spicy, orangey red tones right here at the bottom. But it's got purples, it's got 2 interesting duochromes, and over here you get a cool tone section, which I love. Especially this cashmere shade is one of my favorite neutral shades in my entire palette collection. I truly love that. It doesn't have a huge amount of pressed glitters either, which I also appreciated about that. It just has some really stunning shades. This is my replacement for the the Queen of Hearts from Colored Rain. The Desert Dusk is the palette that I would reach for over the Queen of Hearts when it comes to warm tones with a pop of purple. Hi, we're back. If the lighting looks different, we are having a massive rainstorm that's not going to lay down anytime soon. So that's why I thought that we could continue with a bit of extra artificial lighting. So I hope you don't mind. I prefer not to film with artificial lighting because it throws off the colors of shades a lot, I find. So that's why I just need a little bit of help finishing this video because I do want to finish filming it right now. Number 7 is the Nabla Cutie Coral palette. I mentioned I love my cutie palettes, and that definitely goes to show because there's 2 of them in this top 10. This is what the coral one looks like. Look at how pretty that is. I was nervous to try this. This is not one of the initial ones that I bought because I didn't think I was going to like it, but then I did try it and I fell in love. This color story just comes together for me. I could have done without this like bronzy gold shade perhaps, but it still works okay on the lower lash line. I can get away with it. We have 2 really interesting shimmers. The red and the peach really nicely complement each other, and the dark brown rounds out the palette and gives it the versatility it needs. So that's why this gets to go into the number 7 spot. Number 6, the last Zoeva palette from their chocolate bar line. This is the Blanc Fusion, and this is the one that never really got a lot of hype. Is it warm toned? I feel it is because it has a lot of yellow. But the shades at the bottom, the mattes, are all quite neutral and cool tone leaning. And perhaps it looks a bit more cool toned in this lighting than it actually looks like in real life. I would say the only real true cool tone in here is the dark brown. Everything else is more like neutral leaning, and the entire top row is warm tones because even this white shade has a gold flip. So that's quite yellow toned. Then you get a soft yellow, then you get a full-on yellow that is actually really good. Like, do you just see? It's a true yellow. And then you get a soft, like caramel kind of shade. And then again, something that's a bit more cool toned leaning perhaps. Another discontinued palette, and this with the light is gonna throw it off crazily, but number 5, Natasha Denona Gold. And the Natasha Denona Gold palette, in my brain, it's a warm tone palette. You can't tell me otherwise. Yes, it's more neutral leaning. It's got some mustards and then those like teals and some duochromes over here, but I really like this part of the palette, especially Kava. I think is a shimmer that adds a bit of texture. I took out the yellow tone gold that the palette is named after, and I put that one in my Lila palette, and I took Dragon Bite out of the Lila palette and put it in here because that yellow tone gold just threw it off for me completely. But then it would have been even more warm toned, even though Dragon Bite is like a red with a greenish blue kind of flip to it. It's a duochrome. But yeah, this is really lovely. It does have some really good warm tones in here as well. Especially this bottom row I feel is very warm toned. Number 4 then, Lime Crime Venus XL. I have very often described this palette as the modern Renaissance on steroids. That's just what this is to me. It is fully berries. It's not a neutral palette per se. It's perhaps a bit more colorful than most neutral palettes. But this to me is what I wanted modern Renaissance to be. It's very berry. You get some plums in here, but it is very warm toned as well. My other favorite shade to wear though, mustard browns. And one of the best mustardy brown palettes that has been released is the Urban Decay Naked Honey. Forget the honey in the name. This should have been named the Naked Mustard. I don't think that sounds as sexy though, because really, yes, you get that yellow in the middle, but if you don't look at those, do you see? It's just mustard browns in varying shades. I loved it. This is one of my favorite Naked palettes till this day. Like if I want to go warm toned with a Naked palette, this is the pick. This is the one I go for. And number 2, whenever I think of like a good warm tone palette that I can really see myself getting a lot of use out of, the Anastasia Soft Glam palette is the pick there because it is warm toned, and yes, it has the orange, but it also has rosy tones. So for instance, we get Dusty Rose in here, and also the shade Sultry that is in here, and Rose Gold, I think it's called. Rose Pink. Like it has some pinky tones, and then especially this mulberry shade I appreciate. This is just such a good warm tone palette that Soft Glam is indeed the way I would describe this. This has very nice, soft, modern glam looks in it, and that's what I appreciate. And finally, my number 1 warm tone palette. I've been harping on about not loving orange tones, but something happened when I put this palette on my eyes, and it's the Nabla Cutie Analog palette. This, perhaps because it's more reddish toned rather than orange leaning, you get 2 really nice dark brown shades. This peachy shade has some gold running through it. It's a really nice duochrome, a very nice light gold here, so nothing is too yellow or too orange leaning. This is that warm spicy look that makes me go like, if I want to go warm spicy, this is what I want. So that's it. Those are all of the eyeshadow palettes I wanted to rank for you today, all of my warm tone palettes. I definitely still have one other ranking video planned out, which is going to be my grungy eyeshadow palettes. Because I was away for a bit in December, I didn't get around to planning that one out and talking to you about those. So that's going to come up, but not anytime soon, because I don't feel the time is right going into spring to talk about grungy eyeshadow palettes. If you're super duper interested, then of course I can already do it next month, but I think it's something I want to save for later in the year because I don't really see myself decluttering any of my grungy eyeshadow palettes, because those are some of my favorites. So that's why I want to do that at some other point in time, and then we will have ranked pretty much my entire eyeshadow palette collection. I think actually there's still a couple of missing here and there, but who cares? So thank you very much for watching today. I hope this video was helpful for you in one way or another. If you liked the video, then I would appreciate it if you could thumbs up the video. That would help out my channel for sure. And if you could subscribe, that would be lovely too. I make 3 new videos a week, and I chat about eyeshadow palettes a lot on this channel. So I hope you would like to stay tuned for more. I hope to see you in my next video, and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.